When General Caleb returned from his campaign, I accompanied my brother, the Emperor, to the city gates to welcome him. The royal physician had already told me he had lost his memory. I watched as he showered a woman by his side with devoted care. I watched as he righteously ignored the engagement between us. Princess, a love that is forced will never be sweet. Why must you insist on clinging to this? So I agreed to break the engagement and departed to marry into a foreign court. He, however, followed close behind with 3,000 cavalry. I sat in my carriage, not even bothering to lift the curtain, and returned his words to him, piece by piece. The first time I saw Isla was before the entire army. She was dressed in practical white riding attire, her cuffs tied tightly with cords. She sat astride Caleb's horse with an air of clean, sharp confidence. It was the magnificent steed I had gifted him. A horse with a coat as glossy as polished silk, capable of covering vast distances in a single day. Its eyes were so bright and spirited that the moment I saw it, I begged my brother for it. And Caleb did not disappoint, riding it 1,000 miles into battle, reclaiming 13 cities, and returning in glory. I stood beside my brother, doing my best to maintain the dignity of a princess. But beneath my sleeves, my hands were clenched tight. Biting back my emotions, I stepped forward with a smile. Caleb, it has been a long and arduous journey. He was just lifting her down from the horse. Hearing my voice, she looked up at him in surprise. Caleb, someone is calling you. He turned. It was the same face, the same features, but now they were etched with the harshness of the frontier and a chilling aura of death. His gaze swept over my face, devoid of emotion, polite, yet distant. I, your subject, Caleb, and my wife, Isla, greet Her Highness, the Princess. My hands suddenly went slack. If not for my lady, in waiting's support, I might have collapsed. The physician was right. He had truly forgotten me. Those eyes, which once held a universe of tenderness only for me, were now filled with ice. The only man who ever called me Fina seemed to have vanished 3 years ago. Isla's eyes sparkled. She stared at my face, then dipped into an awkward, clumsy curtsy. So you are the princess. On the road, everyone said you were a heroine who puts men to shame. As she spoke, she reached out to touch my embroidered robes, her voice filled with envy. It is so beautiful. Insolence, one of my ladies, in waiting, reprimanded her sharply. She was the strictest adherent to court hierarchy and immediately spoke out. The princess's person is invaluable. How can a common girl be so ignorant of decorum? General Caleb, the lady you favor seems to lack a certain understanding of court etiquette. I knew from her words that she was defending me. I had waited for Caleb in the capital for 3 years. No matter how the common folk mocked me, saying it was for power, or that I couldn't find a husband due to my plain looks and arrogant nature, I had hidden myself away in the palace, embroidering the wedding gown we had planned together. Before he left for the war, Caleb had promised me, when he returned, he would personally escort me in a grand procession to be his bride. But now, it seemed his promise had been given to another. A bitter taste filled my mouth. The next moment, a blade flashed before my eyes. Caleb had drawn the sword from his waist and pointed it at my lady, in waiting. His gaze was so fierce, it was as if he meant to execute her on the spot. Princess, if your attendant cannot learn to respect my wife, then I am willing to teach her a lesson on your behalf. The blade was still stained with blood. Me lady, in waiting, well-versed in history and poetry since childhood, possessed a proud spirit. She simply scoffed. Having turned your sword against our enemies, General, do you now intend to aim it at your own people? Besides, you have returned triumphant. Lady Isla will surely be granted a noble title. Will you be at her side during every gathering of court ladies in the future? At this, Isla began to cry. Caleb, don't be rash for my sake. I am fine. She then knelt directly on the ground and kowtowed to me several times. Princess, it is my ignorance of etiquette. It is all my fault. Her cries drew the attention of the crowd. Even my brother, the Emperor, was distracted. He had been speaking with Caleb's father, seeing the commotion. He had no choice but to walk over. Serafina, do not be impolite. Caleb had returned a victor. No matter the reason, the emperor could not reprimand him. Serafina? Caleb murmured the name. A flicker of confusion crossed his eyes. He seemed to remember something. My heart leaped into my throat, and I found myself staring at him. But the flicker of recognition was fleeting, quickly replaced by cold indifference. My brother didn't think much of it, simply nodding. Yes, this is my sister, Princess Serafina. A meaningful smile touched his lips. Though once, you only ever called her Fina. Caleb's hand stiffened slightly, his movement to sheathe his sword frozen for a moment. My lady, in waiting, snorted. Your Majesty, it seems the general is lost in a world of tender affections. How could he possibly remember our princess? I cut her off. Enough? Say no more? Then, I looked at him with a smile. Though it was a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. General Caleb, we can speak of this in detail once you have returned to your manor. Yes, I still wanted to give him a chance. The physician had said he faced death countless times on the battlefield. He said his head was covered in blood upon his return, that he must have suffered a severe blow. When he awoke, everything was a blank slate. So, I did not blame him, I thought. We still have plenty of time to get to know each other again. My brother hosted a grand banquet to welcome them back. For a time, the court was filled with the cheerful clinking of glasses and camaraderie. I sat at my brother's right hand. The wine in my crystal goblet shimmered in the candlelight, no different from any other day. But when I drank it, it tasted unbearably bitter. Isla approached me. The palace maids had already helped her change into court attire. Not the magnificent robes of a noble lady, just the simple dress of a common woman visiting the palace. I understood at once. My brother had no intention of letting Caleb marry her. Caleb was a victorious general. If the emperor could not keep such a man under his control, he would not sleep at night. She raised her cup to me with a smile. Princess, a toast to you, my lady. In waiting cleared her throat. Lady Isla, in the presence of the princess, you must refer to yourself as this humble servant, or if you have rank, your subject. Isla pouted. Why are there so many rules in your palace? It is not as much fun as the great desert. I smiled. Are you from the desert, my lady? I am. Isla nodded enthusiastically with the innocence of a young girl. She touched her earlobe, her face suddenly flushing. The general is the great hero who saved us all. That is why I was willing to come to the capital with him. But Princess, you and Caleb, you aren't very close, are you? Her eyes were fixed on me. Her brow arched slightly, her nervousness unconcealed. I chuckled softly. That, I believe, is something Caleb should tell you himself. He had lost his memory. I had no wish to take advantage of his condition. I simply met Isla's gaze with unwavering honesty. Her hand gripped the crystal goblet so tightly. Her knuckles turned white. The next moment, her hand loosened, and the cup shattered on the floor with a crisp sound. Everyone was startled. Caleb was by her side in an instant. He bowed deeply to me. Princess, if Isla has offended you in any way, I pray you will forgive her. Caleb carefully took out a handkerchief and began to wipe the sticky wine from her hands, bit by bit. That unique patience, once reserved only for me. Even the handkerchief she held was one I had embroidered for him before he left. The embroidery was of a willow tree, a private symbol between us of his promise to return. But now, it seemed that promise could not be kept. A sourness stung my nose. General, that handkerchief is quite exquisite. I wonder where it came from. I heard him say, Isla loves the willows of the capital, so she embroidered one on this handkerchief and gave it to me. So, that was it. Isla knew his mind was a blank canvas, and on it she had painted her own story, so that by the time they reached the capital, the new memories were complete. For a fleeting moment, a guilty look crossed Isla's face. She glanced at me quickly. Perhaps at that moment, she understood that I was the one who had shared vows and promises with Caleb, and she was nothing more than a thief. I fled the banquet in disarray. My brother sent his personal attendant after me. He told me that Caleb had faced death countless times on the battlefield, that the urgent military dispatches from 3 months ago reported him as missing and presumed dead after an attack on the enemy. It was Isla who had carried him, hiding from place to place in the city. It was she who, after learning his identity, risked her life to pass along messages. And it was she who, when the enemy closed in, used her own life as a decoy to help him escape. On the frontier, she and Caleb were already considered husband and wife. And I was just a princess who lived for pleasure. One who would flee in terror at the first sign of an invading army. The attendant urged me not to be too heartbroken. He said the general was merely confused for the moment. That one day, he would remember all the kindness the princess had shown him. My brother would always remember. As long as I was unwilling, he would never grant the marriage. But I just felt weary. Not even when I helped my brother survive the treacherous palace intrigues had I felt this tired. I had seen the look in Caleb's eyes when he gazed at Isla. The raw emotion in them was no pretense. He didn't even spare me a second glance. Perhaps he truly believed I was the person from the rumors. A cruel, cunning, and useless princess who knew only pleasure. I waved the attendant away. Go back. Tell my brother, I am fine. He gave me a worried look before bowing deeply and departing. The entire palace knew of my pain. When my brother was still the crown prince, the favored consort ruled the court and eunuchs vied for power. It was a pit of vipers. My mother died giving birth to me, and my father immediately declared me a cursed star. He sent my young brother to the Eastern Palace. And I, only a newborn, was thrust into the care of a minor noblewoman. She could barely feed herself, let alone me. Growing up cold and bullied was a common occurrence. I had even grown used to it. But everything changed when Caleb entered the palace as the prince's study companion. The Shen family valued decorum and rules above all else. Caleb was no different. Even at a young age, he stood with his hands clasped behind his back. At first glance, he looked like a miniature court official. He was the one who, after I was kicked into the lake by other princesses, braved the frigid winter water to save me. When my father forbade me from studying with the other royal children, Caleb would secretly bring me books. When the palace maids mistreated me, he would find ways to let my father see. Though my father disliked me, he would not tolerate such behavior from servants. Fortunately, the Shen family held military power and high standing. My father would sometimes turn a blind eye, and so, my life gradually improved. How could a person who had been so good to me simply forget me? That night, after removing all my adornments, the woman in the bronze mirror was wan and weary, her long hair cascading down her back. A stark contrast to the daytime's formal elegance. "Princess, if I may be so bold," said the lady in waiting who had defended me, offering a bowl of sobering tea. I closed my eyes, giving her unspoken permission to speak. "General Caleb is no longer a suitable match. Your Highness should let him go. In my opinion, the princess is superior in every way. How can you not compare to that Isla?" I drank the tea in one gulp and let out a soft laugh. "You simply believe my status makes any comparison to her beneath me, don't you?" The lady in waiting paused, then nodded silently. Though her mind was filled with rules and etiquette, she had been by my side for a long time. She was now utterly devoted to me. In truth, I knew her words were not without reason, but I didn't want it to end like this. Caleb's memories were only altered. He would surely remember. Without the moon's glow, the glazed tiles were an inky, trembling black. I closed the window and curled up under the brocade quilt. Even if a mountain of knives and a sea of fire lay ahead, I had to try. Having made my decision, I summoned Caleb to the palace the next day. But the young eunuch sent to deliver the summons returned, saying that Caleb had gone with Isla to a temple to burn incense. Isla was of a delicate constitution. The general wished to pray for the Buddha's blessing. I froze, my heart pricked by 1,000 tiny needles. A man who had fought on the battlefield actually believed in the Buddha. Unwilling to give up, I changed my clothes and left the palace. When a princess travels, the masses part way. It was the same this time. By the time I reached the temple, they had already made their wishes and were hanging up prayer charms. Isla was the first to speak. Her lips curled in a pout. A princess's outing certainly comes with a lot of fanfare. Don't you know how wasteful this is of the people's resources? I was at a loss for words, my gaze shifting to Caleb. He was also frowning, looking at me with disapproval. As I recall, there is a place for worship within the palace. For you to travel like this is indeed extravagant. If anything were to happen, the blame would fall on your attendants. If your highness has no urgent business, it would be best not to leave the palace so readily, for the sake of the people and your servants. For others, and for yourself. A sharp pain shot through my chest, and I had to take a deep breath. I had never cared for such pageantry before. Because back then, Caleb was always by my side. After he left for the war, I was ambushed during an outing from the palace. I nearly lost my life. The assassins were sent by the enemy. They hoped the death of a princess would buy them a few months of respite. So my brother assigned a special unit of shadow guards to me. Wherever I went, I had to be protected by a large retinue. Now, this very protection had become a weapon for them to use against me. I suddenly realized, if he loved me, these were acts of protection. If he did not love me, they were evidence of my extravagance and wastefulness. The autumn wind whipped at my long skirt. I stood there, quietly watching the two of them walk away together. In that moment, I felt an unbearable sense of humiliation. I had someone retrieve the charms they had hung. 2 red silk ribbons. The handwriting on them was all too familiar. He had been the one to teach me how to write my own name when I first learned. The shadow guards investigated and told me that Isla was the daughter of a simple farmer. Before meeting Caleb, she sold tea at the city gates. She was illiterate. Now, her handwriting was identical to his. Perhaps he had taught her. Stroke by stroke, a wave of resentment washed over me, and I subconsciously crumpled the ribbons in my hand. But I regretted it as soon as I did it. I gave the ribbons back to a young monk, asking him to hang them up again. With the help of my lady-in-waiting, I walked out of the temple. After a short distance, I stopped again and had the monk find a pair of red ribbons with the same handwriting. Caleb had come here with me before he left for war. At the time, I was terrified of the merciless blades on the battlefield, so I had begged him to come with me. The master says that once these red ribbons are tied together, it is for a lifetime. The Buddha is watching. He will ensure your safe return. I deliberately tied a dead knot, as if that could soothe the unease in my heart. Then I climbed the tree myself and wrapped the ribbon tightly around a branch. Caleb stood below, looking up at me. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling his face. His eyes shone brightly. In that moment, his eyes held only me. After returning to the palace, I fell gravely ill. I threw the 2 faded red ribbons directly into the fire, and watched as they turned to ash. Only then did I lean back and lie down on the bed. This relationship was like those 2 ribbons, seemingly vibrant, but destined to vanish into nothing. A few days later, Caleb came to see me. I was dizzy and nauseous, half reclining as I drank my medicine. Perhaps my appearance was too haggard, for he paused in surprise when he saw me. His hands fidgeted with the pouch at his waist. For a rare moment, he was quiet. I dismissed my attendants and asked him, "Why has the general come to my palace today?" Since I was to give up this love, a clear distinction had to be made. I no longer used personal pronouns, but the formal address used for officials. Caleb hesitated for a moment, then knelt down. I finished the rest of the medicine. So bitter it burned my throat. "I have come today to ask the princess to let me go." "What does the general mean by that?" "Today I went to ask His Majesty for a marriage decree, but His Majesty said that you and I already have an engagement." I remained silent. In truth, Caleb and I only had a private agreement. We had made a vow under the moon. He had given me his most prized possession, a small tiger carved from a gemstone, small enough to be held in my palm. It was under my pillow right now. In the years he was away, this little tiger was what got me through the long nights. Caleb kept his head down, but his back was ramrod straight. I looked at his unfamiliar eyes, and couldn't help but smile bitterly. General, what is the meaning of your words? Caleb looked up, his gaze firm. I wish to tell the princess that there is a saying among the common folk. A love that is forced will never be sweet. I hope the princess will consider this carefully. Of course, I knew that saying, but he had forgotten. This love was not one I had forced. It was mine to begin with. I managed to sit up, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. I straightened my collar as best I could. My voice was resolute. Caleb, did my brother not tell you why we have an engagement? Caleb was adamant. His Majesty has told me. I am grateful for the princess's misguided affection, but I believe matters of the heart cannot be forced. As it is now, the only person I wish to marry is Isla, and it can only be her. My heart sank like a stone. All our history, the hardships we endured to secure my brother's throne, the way we relied on each other in the palace, our determination to move forward together, all of it had been reduced to a misguided affection. Perhaps it was the illness that made me so fragile. I hadn't felt this way since my brother ascended the throne. He was the one who had broken the silence between us. He was the one who had exchanged love tokens with me under the moon. He was the one who, before he left for war, had made a vow. He would marry me with all the glory of a great general. Since birth, I had been called a cursed star, so he would use his glory to show the world. I was not. He had taught me everything, except how to let go. But my silent accusations did not move him in the slightest. He simply kowtowed deeply. His voice was calm. What the princess speaks of is all in the past for me. I have let it go. The princess should do the same. My fingers clenched the brocade quilt, the golden threads digging painfully into my skin. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, after a long silence. My hand reached under the pillow and brought out the little tiger, now polished smooth from my touch. In that case, I shall grant the general's wish. Caleb, this is the last thing you will ever teach me, and I will learn it well. From now on, we are strangers. The tiger was thrown to the ground with unexpected force. It shattered into pieces. A shard flew up and grazed his forehead, and a thin line of blood quickly appeared. His rigidly kneeling body trembled violently. As if struck by something, he stared blankly at the tiger's eyes. They were two black gemstones of the finest quality, now scattered on the floor. Countless tiny fragments lay in a pile. The shape of the tiger was no longer discernible. I was breathing heavily, my forehead covered in sweat. Attendants. My personal maidservant rushed in. I pointed to a nearby redwood box. Return this box to General Caleb. The maidservant was shocked. Princess, go now. The box was not large. Inside were all our letters, the interesting trinkets he had bought for me outside the palace, and the flowers he had given me now withered, but still carefully preserved. Even the wrappers from the pastries he had brought were neatly folded inside. When Caleb saw it, his shoulders slumped. The light from outside poured in. His face was half in shadow, his lonely figure seeming to hold a trace of bewilderment. Seeing the box, he seemed to realize he had underestimated my feelings for him. Me, maidservant, indignant, spat on the ground. And to think the princess thought of him day and night, so afraid of distracting him on the battlefield that she dared not even send a letter. And look at him, finding another woman to share his life with in the blink of an eye. Her careless words felt like a thin thread tightening around my throat. Tighter and tighter, until I could barely breathe. A mouthful of blood spewed forth. I could hold on no longer, and fell into darkness. When I awoke, my brother was sitting by my bed. His back was stooped, as if he had aged several years. I managed a weak smile. Brother, what brings you here today? Isn't the court busy? As if just snapping out of a daze, he personally tucked the corners of my quilt. You are this ill. How can I pretend not to know? I said. I have already made things clear with General Caleb today. Just let him be, brother. He said nothing. I continued to persuade him. He has just returned victorious. If you do not grant him this, what will the soldiers think? Besides, my engagement with Caleb was never made public. You need not worry. My brother was silent for a long time before finally nodding. The gesture seemed to cost him a great deal of effort. His cool hand touched my face. Fina, you have suffered. My brother was not by my side much as we grew up. He always felt he owed me, and so he granted me immense power. Even before issuing a decree, he would often come to me for my opinion. We were two vines, intertwined, relying on each other for survival, growing together. I squeezed my brother's hand and smiled. The envoys from the kingdom of Wei have arrived. Brother, let me go as the peace bride. My brother thought that if he didn't say anything, I wouldn't know. Caleb's victory did not mean Wei was completely defeated. Those 13 cities were originally ours, taken from us by them. Political marriages were now commonplace. The other princesses had all been married off to various kingdoms by our father upon reaching adulthood. My brother was not yet married, leaving me as the only princess in the palace. Even in defeat, Wei dared to send envoys to propose a marriage. This meant they still had the power to make a comeback. Without a period of mutual rest, it would be the people of both nations who suffered. My brother had promised to protect me for a lifetime. He had even given me the title Yong'an, meaning eternal peace. He wanted Caleb to marry me so that I would never have to walk the path of a peace bride. But now the Wei envoys were here, and my brother could no longer make excuses. He stood up abruptly, his attitude resolute. Do not even think it. I would rather the entire nation face the enemy than trade a woman for peace. My brother looked at me, his face ashen. He clearly wanted me to abandon the idea. Brother, we do not have many soldiers left to fight, and Wei's terms are very tempting. I met his gaze, laying out the stakes. 100 years of peace, in exchange for the sacrifice of one person. Me. My brother remained silent. I did not press him, only saying softly, Brother, consider it carefully. I will await your imperial decree. 3 days later, the emperor's decree was announced to the world. Princess Seraphina of Yong'an, by imperial command, would travel to the kingdom of Wei to form an alliance through marriage. In half a year, she would depart with the envoys. Holding the decree, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. But there was still a pang of sadness. This palace held few good memories for me. What little there was, Caleb had given me. Now that we had gone our separate ways, even that last bit was gone. Snow had begun to fall outside. I propped open the window, leaving a small crack. The chill seeped in, quickly spreading through my body. Just then, a figure climbed in through the window. I was startled and about to call for help, but the person quickly covered my mouth. His face was covered with a black cloth, but his eyes were incredibly bright, as cold and clear as an icicle hanging from the eaves. So you are to be our little Wei Empress. His voice was deep, as if he were deliberately lowering it to disguise his true tone. I glared at him. He laughed, his chest rising and falling. It was only then that I realized how tall this man was. His fingers were long and slender, his skin pale. He was not one of our people. I struggled free. Are you the Wei envoy? I warily put some distance between us. He, on the other hand, seemed perfectly at ease. He had no weapon and showed no intention of attacking. I gradually relaxed. I came on behalf of the Wei Emperor to see you for myself. He said Princess Seraphina was hideously ugly and an old maid. His tone was carefree and undisciplined, not like an envoy, more like a noble young prince who had escaped from Wei. Thinking that I would soon be marrying into Wei, I did not call for the guards, but instead poured him a cup of water. He raised an eyebrow. You are not afraid of me? If you had ill intentions, wouldn't you have killed me at the start? He chuckled and pulled a short dagger from his robes. Actually, that was my original plan, but I've changed my mind. With a flash of white light, he stabbed the dagger into the table. My emperor said that if you were ugly, I was to kill you with this dagger. But if you were beautiful, this dagger would be a token of our engagement. Looking at his words and demeanor, he couldn't have been more than 17 or 18. I couldn't help but smile. It had been a long time since I had seen such a person. I extended my hand, inviting him to sit. You are a bold one. He flicked the blade of the dagger with his finger, producing a clear, crisp sound. Then he picked up the cup and drank the tea in one go. I will tell my emperor that Princess Seraphina is exceedingly beautiful and worthy of becoming the Empress of Wei. His gaze was deep, as if holding a secret, hidden smile. Then, with another leap, he was gone as quickly as he had come. The dagger remained, stuck in the table. The light from the snow outside made it seem even colder. The mysterious man came and went like the wind. I never saw him again. The days passed like flowing water, and soon it was the Lantern Festival. As was custom, the curfew in the city was lifted for 3 days. The sound of fireworks was incessant. It seemed even the deep palace could catch a glimpse of the festivities. On the last day, I pleaded with my brother, and left the palace with a few guards and shadow guards. Trees of fire and flowers of silver, the entire city was ablaze with light. The lanterns wound through every street, like a river of stars, all the way to the city gates. Perhaps my brother did not want me to leave with any regrets, for tonight's decorations seemed even more magnificent than usual. I slowed my pace, wanting to burn this image into my memory. Only then, after I married into Wei, in another deep palace, would I have the strength to carry on. At least I would know what my sacrifice had bought. After walking for some time, I saw Caleb and Isla. We hadn't been this close since we parted ways. The faint smile on his face froze. He subconsciously let go of Isla's hand. Isla's expression immediately soured, and she grabbed his hand again, displeased. I paid them no mind, simply turning my head away, intending to pretend I didn't know them and walk away. But Isla had other plans. She pulled Caleb over and called out cheerfully, "Greetings, Princess." I frowned. "Outside the palace, you need not address me as such." "Very well, Princess." She said it again, her voice bright. My guards instinctively glanced around. Fortunately, the crowd was thick, and no one paid any attention. Caleb shook his head at her, but Isla was not happy. "You were the one who insisted on following etiquette, Princess. Now you are the one telling me not to. The capital is so troublesome, not nearly as fun as the desert." Isla's smile was jarring. She asked, as if unintentionally, "But I hear the princess will soon be marrying into Wei. The journey will pass through the desert. Your Highness must be sure to enjoy the view. I also hear the Wei Emperor is not yet 12. When the princess marries, you'll likely be waiting years for a proper wedding night." She giggled. "It will probably be a few years before we hear any good news from the princess." Out of respect for Caleb, I could only manage a polite smile. His contributions were too great. I could not afford to openly antagonize him. But Isla did not seem to understand this. Or perhaps she did. But Caleb and I had too much history. She could not ignore it. So this was the only way she could treat me. An attempt to reassure herself. That Caleb and I were in the past, that the two of them were the future. And it was true. Caleb and I were no longer as we were. Now, she was the one standing by his side. Enough. Unexpectedly, it was Caleb who spoke first to stop her. "Isla, she is a princess after all." Isla was unconvinced. "Caleb, you were the one who said I could be myself. That no matter where I went, I wouldn't have to hide my nature." She put her hands on her hips, her posture defiant. "How can you go back on your word now?" But before she finished speaking, her eyes reddened. Then she gave Caleb a hard shove. "You broke your promise. I am not speaking to you anymore." She turned to leave, and Caleb had no choice but to pull her into his arms. Isla shot me a triumphant look. A look of victory. I watched the two of them with a cold detachment, feeling only boredom. As I was about to leave, The crowd suddenly erupted in chaos. Before I could react, someone shoved me aside. My waist slammed into a nearby stall. I looked up to see a sharp arrow embedded in the ground. It had been shot with such force that if I hadn't moved, it would have pierced through me. A fatal blow. Caleb stared at his own hand, helpless. At the moment of danger, his subconscious had made me dodge. It was an instinct he could not control. Caleb's eyes gradually reddened. A single tear fell. My guards surrounded me, urging me to return to the palace immediately. But amidst the chaos, I heard Caleb's voice. He was calling my name in a tone of extreme grief and sorrow. Fina. Caleb remembered me, but it was all useless now. The day of my departure was drawing near. After the assassination attempt, my brother forbade me from leaving the palace and refused to let anyone see me, even when Caleb knelt outside my hall for 3 days and 3 nights. My brother would not relent. Finally, as the rain poured down, he sent an attendant out to say one sentence to him. "If you had known this day would come, why did you act as you did?" After those words, Caleb collapsed. His former glory gone, but his instincts told him he must protect me, even unto death. Though my brother confined me to the palace, news still found its way to me. He knew my nature, and was not worried that I would go back. And how could I? He had already chosen another woman. In his heart, our love must have reached its end. Otherwise, he would not have so resolutely chosen another. After that night, Isla threw a terrible tantrum in their manor. Even when Caleb was carried back, burning with fever, she slapped him several times. "You said you didn't love her. Then why did you protect her? I was the one who saved you. I was the one who kept you from dying. How dare you treat me like this? Is it because she is a princess, because she is precious and pampered, that you have to protect her?" After her tirade, she collapsed on him, weeping. "Caleb, look at me. I've loved you for so long. I am the one who will always be by your side. She would never suffer with you. Look at her. She is about to become an empress. She is just a vain, materialistic person." I heard she cried so earnestly that the entire general's manor echoed with her sobs. But no one cared. She was a farmer's daughter. Yes. But once she gained power, she lived more extravagantly than anyone. Her headdresses had to be adorned with the finest gems. Bolts of silk and satin were constantly delivered to the manor, and she required an entourage of 6 whenever she went out. Even the number of servants sweeping the courtyard had to be more than 9. Once, a maid accidentally pulled her hair while combing it. She ordered the girl beaten to death on the spot. All the pageantry she had ever imagined, she now applied to herself. The messenger told me, countless times, when Caleb was not around, Isla would dress in the latest fashions, wearing priceless jewelry, and ask the servants if she looked like a princess. So, it wasn't that she hated me. She hated that my status was a dream she could never achieve. I stopped letting the news come in, because soon, I would be leaving with the envoys for my marriage. My brother prepared a lavish dowry for me, and personally escorted me to the 10-mile pavilion outside the city. The spring willow branches brushed against his face, but despite the season, there was an infinite desolation about him. He stroked my face one last time, the ruler of a nation, his voice choked with emotion. "Once you leave, I fear we will never meet again. In this life, I have failed you. In the next, remember not to be born into a royal family." Finally, I could not hold back my tears. With the help of my ladies, in waiting, the trumpet sounded and the carriage slowly began to move, leaving all memories behind. But the carriage had not gone far when the sound of hoofbeats came from behind. I heard Caleb's voice calling out, "I request the princess to descend from her carriage and return to the palace with me." Insolence. The Wei envoy was the first to speak. "Your emperor has already made a pact with my country. Do you mean to go back on your word now?" The men outside were at a standstill, but I sat still, not saying a word. Caleb continued to plead. He was begging me, hoping I would change my mind now and go back with him. He said it was all his fault, that he was willing to guard the borders and fight on the front lines. He said he remembered everything now and only begged me to give him a chance. Caleb poured out his heart, but he seemed to have forgotten what my marriage would bring. 100 years of peace for the border, a chance for the people to rest and recuperate. Even the soldiers who had fought alongside him would have a chance to breathe, now that the nations were established. Wei was watching like a tiger. Weren't those 13 cities the best example? I believed my brother would never be like our father, lost in wine and women, losing our land. But Caleb seemed to be possessed, completely disregarding the politics of both nations. He even tried to force open my carriage curtain and take me away. There was the sound of a blade being drawn, and the sound of it piercing flesh. I immediately threw open the curtain and looked out. Caleb was kneeling on the ground, wounded, a short dagger in his chest. The same dagger that the man who had broken into my palace had carried. I looked up in disbelief. The owner of the dagger was standing behind, looking unconcerned, as if he had not stabbed a man, but an animal. Empress, I have not yet given the order yet. You lift your own veil. His high ponytail swayed in the spring breeze. The clarity was gone from the young man's eyes, replaced by a dark, fathomless amusement. He applied a little pressure with his foot, and Caleb was pinned to the ground. This was the punishment for his offense against the dignity of the Wei Emperor. I hesitated for a long moment, then silently sat back down. Fina. Caleb's cry was left behind. He finally understood in that moment. I didn't want him anymore, completely and utterly. 2 years after I married into Wei, Caleb died. Isla, unable to bear his subtle neglect, sent him on his way with a slow-acting poison. Then she took the gold and silver from the general's manor and disappeared into the night with a servant. My brother told me this when my firstborn son was a month old. The young emperor's hot breath tickled my ear. His voice was like the fragrance of flowers wafting in from outside. Fina? Is that what he called you too? His grip tightened, and I nearly lost all reason. The letter was thrown to the ground. No one paid it any mind.